Texas lawmakers are calling for an immediate audit of a state Medicaid contractor that provides coverage for sick and disabled children, after emails publicly revealed the company might have been spying on state lawmakers and private citizens. This week on Inside the Investigation, Midday anchor and investigative reporter Avery Travis explains the broader implications of the state's investigation. Welcome to Inside the Investigations. This week, I'm joined by someone I don't see all that often anymore because she's not my desk mate anymore, but our midday anchor and investigative reporter, Avery Travis. Avery, thank you for joining us.
Kelly, thanks for having me here. I know now I've moved downstairs. I don't see you guys on the I-team enough, but I was just saying I'm glad to be back here on Inside the Investigations.
We're glad to have you because the story is really interesting. It's not every day you hear accusations that an insurance company that provides health care for children may be spying on their families and lawmakers who govern them. Explain to us how we got here and why it matters.
This has been making some waves at the Texas Capitol, but like you said, let's back up a little bit and talk about the players in this. The company that we are talking about today is Superior Health Plan, and they are one of the really several private companies who roll out and operate the state's various Medicaid programs under a system that's known as managed care. They are managing the care for primarily low income or disabled, sick foster children in these various programs under managed care. So basically how it works, the state funnels public dollars to these private companies to take care of these programs. One of these programs in particular, known as Star Kids, provides Medicaid benefits to young people, as we said, with disabilities. The state turned that over to the managed care system back in about 2016. Since then, some families in this program started saying they noticed changes in the accessibility and really the quality of the care that they were able to receive when they are trying to get, in many cases, life-saving medical care, things whether it's nursing care or actual medical equipment to help their children go from day to day and stay alive. According to the founder of one advocacy group known as Protect Texas Fragile Kids, she calls it a constant daily battle for these families to try to maintain the level of care that their children need. So she was featured along with a few other families in the managed care system in this Dallas Morning News series. This was back in 2018, and the series is known as Pain and Profit, but it really dug into problems these families were reporting with the system itself. After that series published, dozens of bills were introduced in the Texas legislature to try to fix some of these problems that families say they were experiencing. Keep that in mind. That is important, and that Dallas Morning News series by those incredible journalists up in North Texas will come back into play later. But what we do want to note is when these headlines about the recent accusations about Superior Health Plan came about, we went back to the founder of that advocacy group to get her reaction. She very recently came on our weekly political show, State of Texas, to explain really why this matters, and it's beyond the walls of the Texas Capitol.
Horrifying and alarming for families who literally are fighting for life-sustaining care for their children, trying to keep their kids alive.
There are vulnerable families in the state that are not happy with this state program, but then also there's now one of the insurance companies in that program that's being accused of spying by lawmakers.
Exactly, Kelly. I think what's really important to remember is that these allegations, like I said, they surfaced at the Texas Capitol. What we are talking about, though, if we can dig into those allegations, are really emails. They are emails between the Superior Health Plan, actually the now former CEO of that company, and a group that does backgrounding investigations. These emails that we have reviewed do seem to show that former CEO was asking for, and I want to quote here, in-depth reports about specific lawmakers, some of whom are no longer in the Texas House or Senate, some of whom are still serving and sitting lawmakers. For example, one of these emails references a particular lawmaker's divorce records. The backgrounding company is saying, hey, we cannot obtain those documents. So these are fairly specific. They drop these lawmakers by name. The other record that we've reviewed includes a fraud, waste, and abuse report that was seemingly drawn up for this insurance company. And what that contains is information on families and healthcare providers that were featured in that Dallas Morning News investigative series that I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. It had things like the Social Security number and photos of the home of one of the families involved in this program.
Okay, so we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to Avery some more because you've been looking into these emails for a long time, and this came out in a very, very public way. We'll see you when we get back. Okay, so Avery, where we left off, you were telling us about what the base of the allegations that this company has been spying, what the base of those allegations were. But you've been looking into this for a very, very long time. And then all of a sudden you had to expedite your storytelling because it all came out at the Capitol during the hearing. Walk us through it.
So just to recap, in case people missed it, we had reviewed and obtained emails sent between the years of 2017 and 2019 that appeared to show the now former CEO of an insurance company, Superior Health Plan, talking to a backgrounding company about doing in-depth reports on some lawmakers, but also what appeared to be some private citizens whose children were involved in these programs. We had been trying to vet these emails and had reached out to many of the lawmakers mentioned in them for comment. Many of those lawmakers were hesitant to respond on the record or really understand what was contained in these emails and what they meant. We had, of course, we want to note, also reached out to Centene Corporation, which is the parent company of Superior Health Plan, to try to understand what these emails really were. All of this came out, as you said, Kelly, in a very public and fiery committee hearing. It is the Texas DOGE committee that's been making a lot of headlines, the Texas Committee on Delivery of Government Efficiency. We do want to explain that the chairman of that committee really brought these emails, a folder of these documents, to his fellow lawmakers for their review. The chairperson that we're talking about, Representative Giovanni Capriglione, a Republican from Southlake, brought this up and then directed some really fiery questions towards that now former CEO of this company.
I don't think what any of us expected was for a health insurance company that is funded mostly by Texas taxpayer dollars, that they would use some of those monies to hire private investigators.
Wow. Walk us through what happens next.
So after you hear, that comment by the representative, candidly, things got really tense and really heated. Some of the other lawmakers, in fact, it's my understanding most of the other lawmakers on the Texas DOGE committee were not aware that this was going to be brought to their attention, and they had never seen these emails before. And so, as you can imagine, there were a lot of really pointed questions at that former CEO, Mark Sanders. There were a lot of accusations thrown about why a company would be doing this kind of research, this kind of investigation. The allegation was made that they were doing it to intimidate or maybe even try to influence Texas politics and policy. There was even an accusation and a really emotional back and forth between some of the lawmakers about whether they were using taxpayer dollars to do these kinds of reports or investigations in lieu of caring for the kids that Texas pays these companies to care for. There was a lot of concern about the funding of all of this. As you can imagine, that was a tense back and forth. We want to note that former CEO, Mark Sanders, insisted throughout the hearing that all of the information contained in these investigations was publicly available. He, said it was standard course of business. They were trying to understand folks that they were dealing with in their healthcare insurance business and day-to-day business. I do want to note, and we noted this prior in our conversation, Kelly, that we had reached out to Centene, the parent company of Superior, to try to understand these emails prior to this committee hearing. But it has not been since after this all came out at the Texas Capitol that we've been able to get a response from the company. Since then, we have gotten several lengthy responses with context from them about what they say was the intention behind these emails or these kinds of investigations. I do want to read a bit of that so that folks can understand what the company is saying here. And I'm going to read it to make sure I get their statement correct. In part, they said to us, background research has many business uses, including meeting preparation, as well as helping to identify conflicts of interest and potential fraud, waste, and abuse, which is part of our duty as a government-sponsored healthcare organization. The research in question included irrelevant and unnecessary personal information that was inappropriate and should have never happened. They go on to note that this did occur back in 2019, as we noted some of those emails, even dated as far back to 2017. They say this does not reflect the values or standards of their current leadership. Speaking of leadership, we also need to note that very quickly after that March 26 DOJ committee hearing that we've been telling you about, the company did part ways with that CEO. He is no longer the head of that company. And so that's definitely of note. The other thing we've heard from Centene repeatedly is that they say they've done their own internal investigation. They say they've found no evidence of legal violations and that basically that information was not used in any kind of illegal way.
So they're saying a misstep, that we got this maybe more private information that we should have, but we're not doing this anymore. And now the leader of that organization is no longer in place. So that brings us to present day and what seems like more consequences coming down for Superior Health Plan. Walk us through that.
So just this week, we know that the Texas DOJ committee, we found out, sent a letter to a few state organizations because they want, as you said, at least more of an investigation done. The two letters they sent one to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, really asking for sanctions against this company. The way that they want that to look, they're asking HHS to suspend this company's ability to enroll new Medicaid members. They also want to bar the company from receiving any new Texas Medicaid contracts until the Texas Attorney General's office concludes its ongoing investigation. So we haven't mentioned that yet. The Texas Attorney General, after all this came out, launched an investigation into any, unethical or criminal activity that may have been sparked by this. We also know that DOJ this week submitted a request to the state auditor's office because they want what they're calling a comprehensive review of this company's financials. They want to dig into the books and see whether the money that the state of Texas gave this company to operate this program that's supposed to care for kids and Texans was used for this. I think that was really at the heart of what we heard. The concerns of Texas DOJ lawmakers were these taxpayer funds, and should taxpayer funds be used this way? I think a lot of those lawmakers said loud and clear they don't believe that it should.
So it looks like we're going to get more information either way as these investigations work through. But what questions are you planning to ask next?
We've heard from Centene, again, the parent company of Superior Health Plan, that they are looking forward to the opportunity to talking to the state auditor's office and to HHS and clearing up what they really called a lot of false accusations that stemmed from that committee hearing. Again, they reiterated that this was all publicly available information, but I think that's something we'd like to know. We would love to hear more from that company about what this type of work was really for, what was the purpose of it. I also want to note that we know that also this week, a representative laid out another bill. This is Representative Leach from Plano, that would basically prohibit but also allow the state to punish any vendor or contractor who is caught doing some kind of unauthorized surveillance. While he didn't name Superior Health Plan, he did say that it was a direct result of the DOJ committee hearing in March. And so this is kind of a putting pen to paper, putting it on the books, Texas lawmakers saying, hey, we don't want our vendors to do this kind of surveillance. And so, our question to lawmakers and also in general is, Do lawmakers believe that other state contractors are other vendors doing this kind of investigating or surveillance? How far do lawmakers believe that this practice extends? And does it extend beyond what Centene claims was just normal course of business? I think that's a big question. And then finally, Kelly, I think something our team has been working to understand, but really would like to dig in further to, is families' original concerns about the program itself. Is the way that the program is set up, are these companies really delivering the best health care for these kids, for disabled Texans, for foster children? We would really like to take a broader look across the managed care system to see, are these companies delivering? These companies, of course, say that they are. Centene, in one of their statements to us, gave us some statistics about how many families they serve, and they're, they say they're one of the highest quality health care plans. And so I think what our investigative team would like to do is start digging into some of those statistics and understanding, we talk a lot about back and forth at the Capitol, but really what we'd like to understand is the families at the heart of who are supposed to be receiving these services.
That's a good point, because while these two stories kind of overlap, they are separate, right? There's what the DOJ committee thinks this company might have been doing that might have been inappropriate, but then there's also kind of the broader look at the type of care these families are getting and, what can be done to make it better or to improve it.
We heard from Hannah at the very start of our conversation. She, again, is the founder of Protect Texas Fragile Kids. I think she and I, in our conversations, she made it really clear that, families feel like they are fighting tooth and nail to get, a little bit of money here, an extra hour of nursing care. That's been a lot of their experience. And so I think what Hannah really said is that taxpayers should know that that's the experience she's feeling and the folks she represents. Meanwhile, while DOJ is looking at how are taxpayer funds being used. And so they're definitely separate, but I think, Hannah put very, very plainly why it is so important for Texas lawmakers to know how taxpayer money is being used. And of course, we'll be following that. That will likely come out through the Texas Attorney General's investigation, through any efforts potentially from Health and Human Services and the state auditor's office.
Well, I know we haven't heard the end of the story. I'm looking forward to your next updates. Thank you so much for joining us. For anyone listening or watching, don't forget to join us next Friday at 10:30 for another Inside the Investigation. You have so many ways to listen to our show now. You can now listen to the audio version of our weekly discussions wherever you get podcasts. Just search KXAN Investigates. And of course, you can find us always on our KXAN Plus app. Again, thank you, Avery, so much for joining me. And we hope to see you next time.
Thanks again, Kelly.